Something happened in your yard this week. You didn't see it. You were probably inside, making coffee or watching television, or just going about your day. But outside, on your fence or near your feeder, or in the branches of your tallest tree, a bird landed. And it didn't eat. It didn't sing. It didn't do anything you would have noticed. It just looked. It turned its head to the left, then to the right. It looked at the fence line. It looked at the tree cover. It looked at your house. And then, in a moment that lasted less than 4 seconds and will never happen again, it made a decision. Your yard was chosen. Most people never know this moment exists. Most people think birds just show up randomly, blown in by wind or hunger, stopping wherever there happens to be a feeder. But ornithologists who have spent decades tracking individual birds have discovered something that changes everything we thought we understood about the birds in our yards. Birds don't wander. Birds choose. And once a bird chooses your yard, really chooses it, it will come back to that exact space, to that exact feeder, to that exact branch for years. Sometimes for the rest of its life. The bird at your feeder right now is not a random visitor. It is a resident. It selected your yard from dozens of options in your neighborhood. It evaluated your space with a precision that would impress an architect. And it made a commitment to your yard that most humans never make to anything. Today we're going to show you exactly what that moment looks like, what the bird is checking, what it's deciding, what happens in the hours and days after that silent choice is made, and, most importantly, what most people accidentally do that breaks that commitment forever, usually without ever knowing it happened. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will never look at a bird landing in your yard the same way again. How birds evaluate a yard. A bird visiting your yard for the first time is not there to eat. Not yet. It is there to assess. Researchers at Cornell University's Lab of Ornithology have documented what they call the pre-settlement behavior sequence, a specific series of actions that birds perform before they commit to a territory. Once you know what to look for, you will see it constantly. The bird lands somewhere high, a fence post, a branch, the top of a feeder pole. Somewhere with clear sight lines in multiple directions. This is the observation post. The bird needs elevation and visibility before it does anything else. From that position, it does something that looks like nothing. It sits still. But it isn't resting. Its eyes are moving constantly, scanning in a pattern that covers nearly 340 degrees of vision. Birds have eyes positioned on the sides of their heads specifically for this kind of panoramic threat assessment. In those few seconds of stillness, the bird is processing more visual information than you process in several minutes. It's looking for 4 things. Predator exposure. How visible is this yard from above? Are there open areas where a hawk could dive unobstructed? Are there enough shrubs, dense branches, or covered areas to escape into quickly? A yard that feels open to a human looks like a death trap to a small bird. Food reliability. Not just whether there is a feeder, but whether the feeder looks maintained. Birds can assess a feeder from 30 feet away. One that is dirty, has old wet seed at the bottom, or is positioned in a way that makes landing and exiting difficult, will be rejected. The bird has seen hundreds of feeders. It knows the difference between a reliable food source and a neglected one. Water. Fresh moving water is one of the most powerful attractors in the bird world. A bird bath is good. A bird bath with a dripper or fountain, water that moves and catches the light, is extraordinary. Birds can hear moving water from distances that would surprise you. A yard with reliable fresh water in a dry season will be chosen every time over a yard without it. Competition. Is this territory already claimed? The bird is listening as much as it is looking. Are there resident birds already calling from this space? Territorial songs marking these trees as occupied. A bird looking for a new home is not looking for a fight. It is looking for an opening. If your yard passes all 4 checks, the bird moves to phase 2. Why 9 out of 10 yards get rejected? Here is the part that surprises most people. The bird that just evaluated your yard will reject most yards it visits. Studies tracking individual birds during territory selection have found that birds visit an average of 7 to 12 potential territories before making a final choice, and reject the majority within the first 60 seconds. What causes a rejection? The number 1 reason is not lack of food, not lack of water, not even predators. The number 1 reason birds reject a yard is what researchers call sight line obstruction at the escape route. Every bird, every time it lands anywhere, has already identified its escape routes, the 3 or 4 directions it will fly if a predator appears. This happens automatically, in the same instant the bird lands. If those escape routes are blocked, by a fence too close to the feeder, by a bush that creates a dead end, by a wall that eliminates one direction of flight, the bird feels it immediately. Not as a thought, as a physical discomfort. A low-level alarm that never quite turns off. Birds will not stay in spaces that make them feel trapped. Even if the food is excellent, even if there is fresh water, the anxiety of a compromised escape route outweighs every other positive factor. The second most common rejection reason is feeder height. Most people place feeders too low. A feeder below 4 feet places a bird in the threat zone, the height at which cats, foxes, and ground predators operate. Birds know this. A feeder at 5 to 6 feet, positioned so the bird can see in all directions while feeding and has a clear flight path in at least 3 directions, will be visited 10 times more often than a feeder at 3 feet. The third reason is sudden, unpredictable noise. Not natural noise. Birds are completely comfortable with traffic, wind, and human voices. What disturbs them is a door that bangs, a wind chime that clangs sharply, a motion-activated garden ornament. These create stress spikes that over time make birds associate that yard with danger. A stressed bird does not choose that yard as home. If your yard has regular bird visitors, but they never seem to stay, if they eat quickly and leave instead of lingering, one of these 3 factors is almost certainly why. The moment of decision. You've seen a bird sit still on a fence post. You've watched it look around. You've maybe even noticed it fly off without eating, which made you think it wasn't interested. That flight away was not a rejection. That was a test. Ornithologists call it a departure-return sequence. The bird leaves the yard, sometimes for a few minutes, sometimes up to an hour, and then comes back. If it returns to the same observation post within roughly the same area of the yard, it is not starting its evaluation over. It is in the final stage. The return is the tell. When a bird returns to a specific spot it has visited before and resumes the same watching behavior, same posture, same head movements, same stillness, it is making a comparison, holding the memory of this yard against every other yard it has evaluated recently, running a final check, and then, usually without any signal you would notice, it decides. The first sign is a change in behavior at the feeder. The bird stops scanning. It drops its head to eat, fully, without constantly looking up. This sounds like a tiny thing, but for a bird, eating with its head down is an act of extraordinary trust. It is choosing to reduce its visual field, to make itself temporarily vulnerable, because it has decided this space is safe enough. That dropped head, that first full meal, that is the moment of commitment. In research conducted by Dr. Margaret Brittingham at Penn State University, birds that displayed this full feeding behavior on their first or second visit were significantly more likely to become regular residents than birds that fed in short, anxious bursts. The relaxed feeding posture was one of the most reliable predictors of long-term territory adoption ever identified. The bird that eats calmly at your feeder has chosen your yard. Day 1, Day 3, Day 7. Once the decision is made, something remarkable begins. Day 1 looks almost the same as any other day. The bird comes, feeds, leaves. But if you watch carefully, you'll see it. Slightly more time at the feeder than a casual visitor. More food eaten. And it arrives and departs from the same directions each time, beginning to establish its flight path, the route it will use for this yard for the rest of its life. By day 3, the behavior has shifted noticeably. The bird is no longer just visiting the feeder, it is exploring the yard, moving through areas it previously ignored, checking the hedges, investigating the bird bath, landing briefly on structures it hadn't landed on before. It is learning the full geography of its new territory. Every branch, every gap in the fence, every spot where cover is available within 3 seconds of flight. This exploration phase is one of the most extraordinary things to witness in backyard birdwatching. The bird moves through your yard like a new tenant moving through an apartment, opening doors, looking in corners, testing spaces. It is building a 3-dimensional mental map, accurate down to individual branches. By day 7, if nothing has disturbed the process, the bird is resident. It arrives at roughly the same times each morning. It has specific perches it returns to consistently, and it has begun to do something most people never notice. It has begun to learn your schedule. Studies tracking individual birds in suburban yards found that resident birds adjust their feeding times to correlate with human activity patterns in the adjacent house. They learn when the house is active and when it is quiet. They learn which human sounds are associated with the feeder being refilled. In homes where the feeder was consistently refilled at the same time each morning, resident birds began arriving 15 to 20 minutes before that time, waiting. The bird in your yard knows your routine. It has been paying attention since day 1. How birds announce your yard. When a bird establishes your yard as its territory, it doesn't keep that information private. Within days of committing to your space, it begins broadcasting that fact to every other bird in the neighborhood. Birds have what researchers call establishment calls, specific vocalizations distinct from feeding calls, alarm calls, or mating songs. These function as territory announcements. They say in bird language, "This space is occupied. I am here. This is my yard." What makes this remarkable is that other birds understand these calls. Resident birds in adjacent yards recognize the establishment calls of their neighbors. They know which birds occupy which spaces. They maintain a mental map of the neighborhood's territorial structure, updated constantly through these vocalizations. This means that within a week of a cardinal committing to your yard, every cardinal within several hundred yards knows your yard is taken. But it goes further. When a resident bird detects a new bird entering its established territory, its behavior changes immediately. It interrupts its feeding to call. It moves to a more visible perch. It makes itself conspicuous in a way that says to the intruder, "This space is occupied, the occupant is present, and you are being watched." Most people see this and think their bird is singing happily. In many cases, it is engaged in a territorial announcement as serious and deliberate as a property boundary dispute between neighbours. Your yard, once chosen, has a guardian, and that guardian is far more aware of what enters and exits your yard than you are. What drives birds away forever? Now we need to talk about the part most people wish they'd known sooner. Because once a bird has chosen your yard, once it has mapped the territory, learned your schedule, established its calls, built its mental home in your space, it is possible to destroy all of that. Accidentally, irreversibly, usually in a single afternoon. The most common way people lose their resident birds is what researchers call the sudden environment change event. Here's what it looks like in practice. You decide to trim the hedges. You remove the overgrown shrub near the fence you always meant to cut back. You replace the old wooden feeder with a new plastic one in a slightly different position. You add a wind chime to the garden because you think it looks nice. From your perspective, you have tidied up and added a pleasant feature. From the bird's perspective, 3 of its established safety landmarks have been removed or altered. Its primary feeding station has moved, and an unpredictable noise source has appeared in a previously safe zone. The bird arrives the next morning. It lands on its usual observation post. It begins its scan. Within 60 seconds, it detects that the landscape it memorized is no longer accurate. The mental map it built over weeks is now wrong in multiple places. And it leaves. It may come back once or twice over the following days, approaching cautiously, trying to reconcile its memory with the changed environment. But if the changes are significant enough, if the safety architecture of the yard has been fundamentally altered, the bird will eventually stop returning. It will find a new territory, start the evaluation process somewhere else. And you will notice, a few weeks later, that you just don't see that cardinal anymore, or the chickadee that was always on the feeder in the morning. And you won't know why. This is why ornithologists always advise making changes to bird-friendly gardens gradually, one change at a time, weeks between each, giving resident birds time to update their mental maps rather than confronting them with a yard that has become unrecognizable. The bird that chose your yard gave you something rare. It extended its trust to your space. Maintaining that trust costs almost nothing. Losing it usually costs everything. Your yard has already been chosen. If you have a feeder, if you have trees or shrubs, if you have spent any time watching the birds that come and go, then your yard has already been chosen. Probably multiple times. Probably by birds you recognize without knowing their names. The one that always arrives first in the morning. The pair that comes together every afternoon. The one that sits on the same branch every time. These birds did not find your yard by accident. They made a decision. They ran through their checklist: predator exposure, food reliability, water, competition, and your yard passed. They came back. They tested it. They extended trust. And now they are out there, right now, even as you watch this video, announcing your yard to the neighborhood, guarding the territory they chose, learning your routine, waiting for the familiar sounds that mean the feeder will be filled. The relationship between a person and their backyard birds is one of the quietest and most extraordinary relationships in nature. It requires almost nothing from you, just consistency, just attention, just the knowledge that what visits your yard every morning is not random, it is chosen. And so, in some quiet way that science is only beginning to understand, are you.